morning, everyone.
Good morning. We've been ad-libbing here for you for a little while, but 10 minutes is not too bad.
I sent him two frantic emails, which he may or may not have gotten.
Good.
Hi, folks. My name is Ryan Pickering. I'm so sorry I'm late. I had a bit of a back injury and really overslept with my pain medications.
Oh, that's too bad.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay now.
I'm pleased to report that my father's 65th anniversary birthday was great, and we had a pickleball tournament, and somehow all those 65-year-olds just ran circles around me, and somehow I threw out my back. So, hey, chalk that up for the sustaining value of pickleball. I was not a believer, nor was I in very good shape, apparently. But I want to apologize again that I'm late, and thank you so much, folks, for covering for me. Well, I want to welcome you all to this kind of unbelievable moment in nuclear energy history. And, when I was so honored when Richard asked me to present to this group about nuclear advocacy and where we see this all going. And as some of the folks on the call know, I'm part of the Friends of Fission group that meets every other week. And just in the course of the last 6 months, we've seen this tectonic shift in nuclear energy. And I think many of you folks could have predicted that, but no one really knew what it would look like. And so I'm here to spend some time reflecting on this moment and how we can relate to it and how we can be involved in it. And I look forward to capturing some of your perspectives as we try to thread this needle, this incredible communication opportunity that's ahead of us. And maybe we can figure something out together. I certainly don't feel like anyone really knows how to message this, but I think collectively we can round something out. Does that sound good to everyone?
Perfect. Thank you.
Wonderful, Richard. And anything else I should be aware of before I begin?
Yeah, are you changing your title from new nuclear reactors, or is this sort of a shift in title? Just be honest, Ryan.
Well, remind me, what is the title of this presentation?
It's update on new nuclear plants. That's the title.
Yeah. No, I'll keep that the same. Over the past I love that I set that as the title when Richard asked me 6 months ago because I really believe in just speaking things into existence. Maybe it's a very millennial trait, but we've been told, just put it on the wall, manifest your dreams, and that was my dream 6 months ago. 6 months ago, when I made that title, the United States had essentially no nuclear reactors under construction. We were finishing Vogtle 3 and 4 in Georgia, which is successfully online. There were plans about TerraPower and the carbon-free power project in Idaho had recently been canceled with
New
with,
scale.
with NuScale. Now, um, I'll begin by reminding the group, as many of you know, I was an anti-nuclear activist about 3 years ago. And for most of my professional career, I was designing large solar power systems in California. And I was speaking very publicly against the uh, lack of need for nuclear energy. And I changed my perspective. And I think that is one of the reasons why I've been welcomed into the nuclear space, is I'm open to saying I was wrong, and I call for other people to change their mind about nuclear. Lots of people have had a great take on nuclear for many decades. So a lot of people I talk to that, they're like, of course nuclear, do you not know anything about the energy grid?
Just if only our politicians were so forthright as you are, Ryan.
Yeah, I think that's another thing about my generation is we're willing to be wrong, and I think we've kind of like had plenty of humble pie in our lives, and we see it as a sign of intelligence to change our minds and something to celebrate and something new to talk about. That's the best part about changing your mind is you get to have a new talk track at the dinner party. So anyways, I changed my mind about nuclear energy because of a variety of things. And I think that most Americans are kind of in this mindset. If you weren't pro-nuclear already, you're like, maybe I always was. And if you were anti-nuclear, you're kind of giving it another look because there's an optimism in nuclear energy. I think at the root is there's something interesting that we can solve our problems. And in this world where we're faced with so many challenges, uh, it's it's reassuring to have some kind of big upstream ideas that can have tremendous value to all of society, which is kind of how we've been trained to think in the United States, is how can we lift all Americans up? And I think especially, in the digital age and in the age of social media, people feel like we're disassociating. And so ideas that bring us together, I think, are very powerful. And so,
We have a quick question from Dorothy. If we could hold it for a second, Dorothy, go ahead. Can't hear you, Dorothy. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Ryan, I was hoping that you could tell us what you think some of the biggest obstacles are in terms of public opinion in accepting the increased efforts to promote nuclear and particularly new nuclear.
And if I could add to that, what I was thinking as you were speaking, Ryan, is wouldn't it be neat to get you and oh dear, Bernie Sanders in the same room together? I think that's what she's asking as well.
yeah,
No, I'm just asking about public opinion and what you think are the biggest barriers
Okay.
to
yeah,
public policy.
yeah. I'll happily talk about that. So a little bit more about my background is,
We've already given them.
when I changed my mind about nuclear energy, I I went all in on it. I became very interested in the idea, and thankfully, I was able to find a community of young people in California that was interested in saving Diablo Canyon Power Plant, California's only nuclear power plant. I'm here in Berkeley, and Californians think very highly of ourselves, and we this group that we were involved in did have a sense that, hey, if we should save Diablo for California's sake, but also kind of for a larger sake. Like if California exits nuclear, what does that mean, And so I think one of the first things to answer Dorothy's question is one of the things that's stopping nuclear advocacy is it doesn't have a natural constituency. There's nothing natural bringing pro-nuclear folks together, and they span a very wide range of uh, society and personal belief systems. So the question is, how can we, knowing that we're stronger in a group, how can we come together and create these teams to make things actually happen beyond just typing on the internet that nuclear energy is great, or being one person with a sign outside of a nuclear plant saying, please extend this nuclear reactor. And so I think, uh, to Dorothy's point, we need to, by us being a little more public and creating these natural social groups around it, and by doing things like what Friends of Fission Rethinking Nuclear are doing by writing these letters and making it a topic of dinner conversation or something to rally around and spend our time doing, think it's very powerful. And I think we're seeing an outsized return on that. Friends of Vision posted a letter to President Biden last week, and it got tremendous, support from the industry on LinkedIn, and we hadn't posted on LinkedIn in a few months. We put this letter out to President Biden saying, keep up the good work. And, society starts to rally around that. So I think there's something about nuclear advocacy that just feels a bit hmm, either useless or unpalatable. And I think we just have to overcome that immediate nausea or that immediate um, like disdain for taking a public stand on anything, and knowing that if we don't do it, probably no one else will. So I think starting with social groups like this is tremendously important, and I commend leaders like Richard Steeves and Mark Nelson, who have just had the gusto to put these things together because it is important that we're all here. And then, you know, I think government is also involved, and I think it takes strong leadership from, at least in the United States, our administrations that come in. And the nuclear history has been complex. I do want to commend this current administration for leaning in and empowering young people inside of the administration to make a difference. And I think Secretary Granholm has been part of that. She does quite a bit, so she's kind of pro everything, which is maybe an easier position to take. But she empowered a woman named Julie Kozaraki through the Loan Programs Office to really um, lean in on solving the issue of this nuclear stalemate. And so I just want to point out, I'm going to spend this time pointing out a few documents to the group and my take on them and their importance, and then we'll be able to wrap up. Did I zoom that in too large, or is that a good screen share?
That's good.
Okay. So the first document that I'd like to point out to everyone is this Pathways to Commercial Liftoff Advanced Nuclear. We discussed this a bit in our Friends of Fission group, but essentially it came out in September 2024. So this is very fresh documentation. And I really consider this to be the most important document in American nuclear and probably global nuclear, as the whole world is who nuclear advocates around the world are reading this document. And this is part of a series called the Pathways to Commercial Liftoff, released by the Loan Programs Office. And it's not just about nuclear, it's about how do we enable this infrastructure of the future? How do we use all the tools we have available? And everyone loves the logo. It's this kind of infinity logo showing all the different energy sources we have, and we can be honest about it. It's as much as we love one energy source or another, it's really about the how they all work together, especially in the short term. So this kind of gives everyone their flowers, but it's this woman here named Julie Kozaraki, and Julie's 34 years old, and just an incredible public servant. And I really admire the work that she's done. And she was able to, corral all these very significant people into this report. So again, it feels empowering as a millennial to start to see people my age gaining places of influence beyond, YouTube videos and things like that, but really putting out these incredible things. So what I love about this report is that she spends a significant amount of time describing nuclear's role in the energy transition. Now, I think everyone's a little bit critical of the term energy transition. It's maybe a feel-good term. There's no data that shows that we've ever really transitioned. It's always been an evolution or an expansion or an addition. But truly, nuclear energy has an opportunity to phase out other energy sources rapidly, or phase down, I should say. And she kind of talks about that. And I think that's important because it's difficult to describe to the world why nuclear energy is necessary. And she does some, you can see a lot of her advocacy work in that with the first couple of sections. Then she talks about the existing reactor fleet in the United States and why it's important that 20% of our electricity currently comes from nuclear energy, something that I think a minority of Americans are aware of. And then going on to the different types of technologies and what really is coming to market and describing it in words that, the public can understand. Also, investors. This document is very geared towards like reallocating American investor focus towards this technology. And then it talks about incentives and how to work with the government to deploy this. And she has some strong feelings about how to do this. And her charge is to triple nuclear energy in the United States by 2050. So that's 200 gigawatts of new nuclear built by 2050. And her plan to do that is to learn lessons from the past and apply it to the future. And so she has a deep 7-page breakdown on the Vogtle nuclear power plant in Georgia. And so a lot of people, I think everyone in nuclear advocacy, when they say nuclear, people say, didn't we just build a nuclear plant in Georgia that was over cost and over budget? You say, yes. Let's dig into why that was the case. Can we learn anything from it? And should we do it again? And so I think there's some incredible insights to that. And then talking about the workforce, that is, I think if you talk to the experts in nuclear energy, they're not concerned about selling new nuclear. They're not concerned about the technology. They're not concerned about the price. They are concerned about the workforce. And they predict that to build 200 gigawatts of new nuclear, tripling America's nuclear capacity by 2050, we would need to hire 400,000 people into the industry. And that is a big number, and there's no amount of money that can solve that. That needs to be at a deeper society-wide mobilization. And so I think once again, that's where advocacy comes in, because if young people can't imagine themselves working in this space, it's difficult to start angling in that direction. And and we'll talk about how to nurture that, but I want that to be a focus of my own career, is how can we get young people dreaming about building nuclear power plants and learning all those skills. And even if you don't end up going into the nuclear space, learning how to these high quality welds and learning how to use the highest quality concrete pours, these are tremendously valuable trades that I hope that we can inspire young people to see a world that's not going to college for 4 years for a liberal arts degree or being a YouTube influencer or a video game player. Like there's a fourth option, and it's the trades, and we need them so badly. And I think that's a much broader conversation. Anyways, finally, she kind of quantifies all these things and communicating value. And she's constantly leaning into how do we talk about this? And it's so interesting to see this incredible document from the federal government basically saying we need to communicate better. And in order to unlock all of this, we need to communicate with the public better. And I think that's very reassuring to everyone. And I think it should be a sign to us as people who are vocally interested in nuclear energy in our community that we have a role to play and we should take it very seriously. Okay, so I'll be sending out an email with all of these links so that you'll have them. And I think in combination, a story is being told there. one thing you will notice in all of these graphs, and maybe I'll just show a few of my favorites, and thankfully, Richard has already shared this one. But I think, nuclear energy, I say, sometimes feels like taking crazy pills because you're like, there's this one thing that's so amazing, and we're just not doing it. And people say, oh, it can't really be that good. Well, here's the federal government of the United States saying that nuclear energy literally checks every box. Is it clean? Yes. Is it firm? Meaning, is it dispatchable? Is it available when we need it? Yes. Does it have low land use, which is so important? Yes. Does it have a low transmission build out, which is, again, this transmission builds are almost impossible in the United States in a timely manner? Yes. Concentrated local economic benefits. Does it pay well and are they sustained local jobs? Yes. And does it have direct heat applications? Yes. When I started studying energy, I was amazed to learn that electricity is only about 24% of American energy. Electricity is only 24% of American energy. And I think we kind of think electricity and energy are synonymous with each other, but we also need to look at industrial heat, which is 40% of American energy is, heat to smelt things and bend things and separate chemicals and all these things that we use fossil fuels for, and we can electrify to a certain extent, but really like this direct heat application is huge. The other is transportation, is the other expenditure of energy. And so anyways, wonderful document. I want to move on since I'm cognizant of
Can I,
time, but I'm happy to take any questions about it
yeah,
as
I have a,
document.
Ryan, can I say something about that last slide?
Yes.
Yeah, if you can bring it back. Um, First of all, what isn't on top is the category of cost. I mean, sheer cost, that's not up there. That's where it battles with renewable. You don't have that slide that with there.
Yeah.
Where's
So
that slide? Right, you
price
had it.
is not on there. That's true.
Okay, that and that's okay. And you may address some of that down the road. I think I know where you're headed with that, but so I won't push it. What's interesting is coal plus CCS gets and regular coal get better marks than everything else but nuclear. No, except for geothermal. Geothermal has three dark greens. Coal plus CCS has three, and so does straight coal. And natural gas plus CCS doesn't equal coal. That's crazy. I don't quite get that.
Yeah, I think we're seeing some real politic from the federal government because at the end of the day, we have all these planned coal retirements coming up in this country, and it's my belief that they're not going to happen because
Oh,
we don't have the s- large spinning inertia to turn off these coal generators. And unfortunately, we're really turning them off because they're at their end of their life, not because of the pollution and the health effects that they cause. And so we're having to look at refurbishing these coal plants. And it was always the intention for for nuclear to replace coal. And because we've been spinning our wheels for the last 20, 30 years, we haven't been able to achieve that in a meaningful way. And that's okay. We're up to it now. And I think that we'll see, I think Robert Hargraves, who's a leader in this industry, has always said, the only competition is coal
hmm.
globally.
I see. I would suggest it would be natural gas plus CCS. That's going to at least take over the grid, or be the bridge in the grid for a while. I mean, I always thought it was that, and they're not really kind of indicating that with this table. Anyway, enough of that.
Yeah, well, we'll continue to talk about natural gas, and I think they have their own challenges. I just want to point out one other place is this report goes deep into the cost of nuclear, and it is the federal government's perspective through Julie that you can arrive at $60 a megawatt hour with modern American nuclear today, with the technology that is available today. And so while over the past 2 weeks, we've heard all these announcements about Amazon and Microsoft and everyone investing in Gen 4 reactors. I think that's all very well and good. None of those, and they will happen in the mid 2035s. But how can we? This report is very clear that we need to have things coming online by far earlier than that and build out our industrial capacity. And so this report is very keen and suggests that the cheapest source of nuclear energy is our proven large scale reactors like the ones built in Georgia. And, folks don't like to hear that because it feels kind of like the old thing. But I hope in my presentation that I can empower this group to feel confident about the technology that we have in the United States today because it has the lowest cost per megawatt hour roadmap. Even at scale, the data suggests that just building dozens of large scale nuclear reactors is a way that we can achieve $60 per megawatt energy, which is the same cost or probably slightly less than natural gas over the next 30 years. And so, to your point, the United States is a tremendous amount of natural gas resources and much more than almost most countries in the world. And that is certainly the competition in the United States. I think around the world it's coal, but in the United States, certainly natural gas. Yes, Dorothy, question.
I'm assuming that the reason that we're able to get this low cost is because we will be duplicating the experience that we've already had rather than designing a new reactor, a different reactor modified each time. Is that why we would achieve that low cost?
That is one reason why. The second reason is that, as many nuclear historians would point out, we have tried almost every type of nuclear reactor in this country as part of the Atomic Energy Commission. And we selected the pressurized water reactor because it had a very high reliability. And then with those pressurized water reactors, we've built submarines, we've built small modular reactors, and we've scaled them up. And the real reason behind that economies of scale is that if you're going to build a nuclear reactor, you may as well get an enormous amount of energy out of it. The physics of that idea is strong. And the challenge with smaller modular reactors is that the civil works of those projects do not scale down with the size of the reactor. So you're paying more for the civil works to build it all and click all the modules together and pour all the nuclear concrete. You're paying more for that per megawatt hour with a smaller reactor. So why not levelize those costs over a larger system and therefore lower the price system wide?
Can I add something? But
You
there
may.
you have I don't know how you had a slide that showed all of these different starts and tweaks to the current reactors we have. And to Dorothy's point, if that modification keeps happening, the NRC is going to have a field day with it. I mean, you've got to lock this thing down. And I think that's what Dorothy was trying to refer to. But you have a slide that shows that somewhere. I went through all these slides last night. Like 50 different versions of the may not just be the AP1000, but a few others like it. They got to stop doing that, right?
Well, I think that our I think that the United States can walk and chew gum at the same time, but this Department of Energy, and as part of this deck that I'll be sending out, has said that we do need to choose. We need to down select on designs. We can have as many science projects as we want, science fair projects, and we can continue to try every reactor that folks want to pay for licensing. But at some point, you just have to pick and do it. And nuclear has never been able to select a design in the US. And the only successful nuclear rollout in the world generally has been France. And they picked one design and they held their nose and they did it. And there's those, all those reactors are still running today. And we can talk about how France hasn't taken care of the reactors very well and kind of lost sight of the ball, and haven't iterated. But yes, to your point, as the report points out, there are 95 nuclear reactors in the United States today, and only 5 of them are the same.
That's funny. Yeah. What? So that, yeah, down selecting, but who's at fault with that? I think it's the companies. I think it's Westinghouse and the other General Electric, or some of these big companies just keep doing this crap. The companies have to stop, don't you think?
There is something to be said for our very unique energy system in the United States. And whereas every country in the world has a basically top down, some have energy markets and everything. We are so big, we electrified so quickly. We have 3,000 utility companies. And then, when Eisenhower spoke Atoms for Peace into existence and created the Atomic Energy Commission, he was very clear that this was going to be led by private companies. And we still have that legacy today. And the Department of Energy is very clear that it has to be privately led, government enabled. And we just have to make that work. But Jigar Shah from the Department of Energy has been very clear that it is important that advocates, speaking directly to us, we can have these conversations here in a safe space, but when we are talking to lawmakers, we need to be very pointed about what we can and should do. And I think that's a lot of pressure for a bunch of amateur advocates to put on but they said, lawmakers and the Loan Program Office, they hear hundreds of nuclear proposals from every kind of way you can split an atom and every kind of way you can build it. And it's analysis paralysis. And so that is why, at least this Department of Energy is like, hey, we think we've found one of those reactors that we really need. And we shouldn't just build these AP1000s in the United States, but we should also build them in Canada and the UK. And if you're an ally with the United States, like this is what it looks like. And I think we will add small modular reactors. I think we'll definitely add microreactors to the menu. But again, selecting one is important. And that is why this document came out relatively recently, August. This is Idaho National Lab. It was written by Bradley Williams, who's 36 years old. He's my age, really cool guy. He wrote the whole thing. And then John Wagner, who is the director of Idaho National Labs and probably one of the most influential people in global nuclear, signed on to it. And so did Jess Guillen, who is this amazing guy. And Jess is the inventor of the Marvel microreactor. So this is one of the brilliant minds of microreactors saying, deploy AP1000s, like, and Dr. Wagner is also very into advanced nuclear and all these advanced designs. And these are people saying, we got to focus on one thing for a while all these other things incubate so that we can get the labor force rolling and kind of get everyone just rowing in the same direction. And so opportunities for AP1000 deploying. Very short report. I love a short report, 11 pages. Yes, Dorothy.
I just thought I would mention, although our group has had a number of lectures on nuclear reactors, et cetera, over time, that is not the total focus of our sort of Save the Planet group. So if you could give a brief description of an AP1000, I think that might be a good idea.
Sure. I'll show a visual of it. And once again, we have a very real visual in the Georgia 3 and 4 reactor, Vogel 3 and 4 reactors that came online in Georgia. Essentially, the AP1000 is the current iteration of a pressurized water reactor spanning back to the late 40s. It is the iteration of hundreds of iterations leading to this moment. And it's the combination of many technologies over time. It has way less parts. It is a modular reactor. Some folks call it a large modular reactor. It is 72 pre-manufactured modules that are then shipped to a site and assembled. The civil works are still incredible. We have to dig down and create an underlayment just so that it'll be incredibly seismically secure, not because it would create a meltdown or something in an earthquake, but it would potentially damage the reactor and we wouldn't be able to use it. And we are relying on this thing for the cornerstone of our energy grid. So we want it to work no matter what. And, we saw in the hurricanes, these reactors survived hurricanes and ran the whole time through hurricanes. So they're incredibly secure resources because of the way that we build them. And so I'll equip the team with the AP1000. But once again, this is the Westinghouse brand, which only makes nuclear reactors now. I think we all remember Westinghouse making many things over the course of our lives and previous lives. George Westinghouse was also a hero of a guy. Unfortunately, his personal notes were lost in a fire, so we lost kind of the genius of George Westinghouse. But from what we know about him, he was a great guy from Pennsylvania and invented many things. Didn't know about nuclear science. I think he would be laughing today if he saw what his name is on. But he did basically invent electricity with Tesla, and he was a rival of Thomas Edison, and all of that rivalry created modern alternating current. So I think it's cool that one of the founders of electricity is now, the brand of the most modern nuclear reactor in existence. So a very short report, and all it is basically this graph. And they're saying that, sure, we can build nuclear reactors in greenfield sites. That's okay. It's harder because we have to kind of start from scratch. And they are arguing that we should expand our current nuclear sites and add this technology. And they stack rank where they think this would be a good place. Now, the ones in blue are projects that are already underway and I don't know why they included them. I think it's a little bit confusing. So you have Palisades, they're restarting that reactor. That's not an AP1000. 3 Mile Island, they're restarting those reactors. Those are Westinghouse reactors built in the 80s, 70s, excuse me. They were, earlier versions of the AP1000. So you can disregard the ones in blue and you can focus on these green and yellow ones. These are existing nuclear power plants that are running today that have the security and all the infrastructure ready to go. And we would just add new units to them. And I think the most important thing that this report points out is that the communities there like their nuclear plants and they want to expand them and get more jobs, more tax revenue. So we don't have, the consent and the public approval and community engagement would also be shorter because these communities already have petitions saying add to our plant. And by the way, most nuclear power plants in the United States were built for 6 reactors, and most of them only built 2. Many only 1. So just an opportunity there. The land is there and this is ready to go. And to Idaho National Labs, which was set up during the Manhattan Project and invented the nuclear submarine, they're saying this is a clear path forward. Yes, Richard.
One little thing that could be added too is that most of these reactors have been running for 60 years. And the one such as we have here in Wisconsin has put in their application for another 20. Who knows how many years we can get out of them? And not very many people talk about that. The other sources of energy are lucky to last 20 to 25, particularly the renewables. Not mentioned very often.
It's a great point, and we're so lucky that nuclear can run so long. And we just heard a representative from the White House say that we expect all nuclear reactors in the United States, the standard will be running for 100 years.
Wow, nice.
And I mean, what an incredible, if we're focused on sustainability, what an incredible bang for our buck that these reactor vessels, these metal, steel containers that the nuclear reaction is occurring in can last for 100 years. It's just a very elegant, simple solution. When you strip out all the buildings and the domes and everything, and you just see the piping of this system, it's actually quite easy to understand. And, all the pipes can be replaced. And thankfully, the reactor vessel is difficult to replace. It's pretty much in there. That one will last 100 years. And the report also points out that we need to start building these other ones so that we can close those original ones after 100 years, remediate the site, and then build new ones there. And so these sites that have nuclear reactors on them, they're sanctuaries of energy and ecology. I mean, the wildlife in these nuclear reactor areas are so unbelievably strong. We have endangered species and all this nice uninterrupted space where scientists can have field studies, et cetera. So, if we can start thinking about these locations as really hollowed American ground where we're generating the clean, firm baseload for our entire country, and then we need to keep upgrading them and we need to care for them and they need to be places that we celebrate. I think that's an important reframe as we start moving forward. These things are not scourges on the society. These things are some of the best places on earth. And I think we can enable that. Yes,
Yeah.
Lewis.
Thanks. Conley says those vessels have to be redone every so often from the inside on the AP1000. They can't just run and run. They got to be, I don't know, something has to be done on the inside because they get radiation sickness of sorts, and then you got to heat them up from the inside.
Yeah, I've
And
heard about that. It's something called like
and
self-annealing. Yes.
well, yeah, but whereas the MSRs they think would never need that. But anyway, so and by the way, in 2050, I think of the 100 or 94 running, 24 of them are going to have to be relicensed, and maybe they will be, but they're not going to just keep running without a relicense.
Yes,
Okay.
the relicensing will happen, and it sounds like it's got a lot of support. But again, we're putting too much pressure on this system and just juicing our existing reactors. It's like we have to build new ones. There has to be continuity in this space. And so I think that's very important. Okay, next thing I want to point out to the group, and once again, I apologize, I'm late. It's already at almost at the top of the hour. I have one other document to go on, and then I will be compiling this together, and we can continue the conversation via email. I want to thank everyone again for their patience. Let's see. The final aspect that I would like to share with this group, as I pull this up, Dorothy, go ahead.
You're muted, Dorothy.
That's the problem of going to mute. This class actually can go to 12 o'clock if you want to,
Oh, wonderful.
because we're a 2-hour class, although we don't always completely fill the 2 hours, just so that you know.
Thank you. Well, then let's continue without delay. So I'd like to point the group to a third report from Oak Ridge National Lab, another laboratory that was set up during the Manhattan Project and now studies nuclear energy in depth. and it is the evaluation of nuclear power plants for coal and coal power plant sites for new nuclear capacity. And I think this is where advanced nuclear can really shine. And the liftoff report is very clear about that. And this is that running and chewing gum at the same time. There are so many amazing smaller reactors that are coming to market that are flexible and lighter design and with advanced fuels that we may be able to put in smaller places, places that aren't these sanctuaries of massive amounts of clean energies like these AP1000 sites that we have, and all these gigawatt scale sites that we have. Let's continue to build large nuclear there because we have the transmission wires and everything. But what I was interested to learn is that most coal plants in the United States, and there are 1,200 sites with coal plants, 1,200, they're much smaller. They're not these gigawatt scale electricity reactors. They were built by rural electrification co-ops and have been acquired over the years, and they were designed to power, you know, a few counties and rural counties even. And so how can we take those sites and upgrade them? Well, this report suggests that, you know, there are a few that the AP1000 would be a good fit for, but there are also smaller ones that would be a good fit. So here's the summary of the report, and it says there are an opportunity for
Yes, I'm on a Zoom call, but I can walk away.
um, there are opportunities for smaller units, medium, and large units on this at coal sites in the United States. And I just think this is a tremendous resource because it really looks coal in the eye. And I think we can be grateful for coal. I think we've really been mad at coal because of how the air pollution it's caused, and certainly probably caused like respiratory and cancer in our communities. And like we can be honest about that. At the same rate, coal is what made America what it is today. We would not be an advanced society without the coal plants that really brought electricity into existence. And now it's time, because these plants are phasing out, because coal is becoming so expensive to extract and ship and all the environmental costs they have to pay, it's just no longer a competitive energy source in the United States. And so it's time to start making a plan of transitioning these communities, which is not just wires and a piece of land, but also the people who work at coal plants, to boil water using a different method. Yes, Richard.
Just you speak highly of coal, but I don't want you as a class to forget that Canada stopped using coal quite a few years ago. Do not have any coal whatsoever in their grid, and they're not impoverished, and they do perfectly well. Part of it is due to Niagara Falls, I admit, but not all. A lot of it is due to the excellent reactors they have, and we shouldn't think that coal is the only way to get modern.
Agreed. And it would be amazing if the United States could share a coal-like technology that provides baseload, reliable energy that has fuel security, that you can store the fuel on site with our allies and allow them to skip the dirty phase uh, of energy generation and go right to nuclear and other kinds of clean energy. And I think Obama was very clear in that message, like we've got to get nuclear going so we can help our allies skip coal. And I think that was very inspiring. And now is the moment for us to lean into it. So, anyways, another awesome project there. And I think that um, just by citing coal, just by citing new large-scale nuclear at our existing nuclear plants in communities that already want it, and starting the analysis of these coal plants and what would be the best technology to transfer that over, I think that we can really jumpstart this space. And I've got some more resources to share, but I want to pause there and open to the audience. Thank you everyone for their participation thus far. Are there more questions that I can take from the group?
We're pretty active at interrupting all through the talk. That's what.
Wonderful.
Alan's got a quick flashback here. I wanted to get the title of the second slide series about the potential for the AP 1000, the name of the report. I'd like to look that up online and read it.
Oh, he'll send it.
Yeah, it's a nice short one, and it is called Potential for, let's see here, it's called
Commercial.
yeah,
Looks off.
opportunities for AP 1000 deployment at existing and planned nuclear sites. And for those in
Oh, no.
Wisconsin, you know, it points that Point Beach is an excellent opportunity to add nuclear reactors, and it just no work has been done yet at Point Beach. No paperwork has been done, but there are certainly you could certainly add 2 new reactors at Point Beach without a problem. And for those in Illinois, there are many opportunities, but currently in Illinois, it is illegal. There's a moratorium to build large nuclear. So all these sites in Illinois, the birthplace of American nuclear fission for billion energy, this technology is illegal. And so once again, a huge advocacy opportunity if you're in Illinois.
Could I just add that I think the moratorium is based upon not having a storage facility identified. And that's something we must do, whether we're into Gen 4 or not. We've got to deal with it. And that's holding up a number of states. But I think that's the reason for Illinois.
Yeah, and Minnesota is in the same boat,
Yeah.
aren't they? Yeah.
Yep, there are 12 nuclear moratoriums at stake currently. More questions? Yes, Mr. Nachman.
Yeah, you've not said one word about safety. I know why. You were born after Chernobyl. We all were born before Chernobyl. Can you just a couple of words about that you, oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was born in 1987, 1 year after Chernobyl. And my mother is from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and she endured through 3 Mile Island in 1979, and she developed thyroid cancer. And we don't know where that came from. It's unlikely that it was caused by the 3 Mile Island incident, but it's impossible to tell. But you know, in Chernobyl, the primary cancer caused was thyroid cancer, and so that was the reason why I was an anti-nuclear activist. You know, as I felt that nuclear had harmed my mother, and you know, when I was a child, she had her thyroid removed, and thankfully she's living today, and she just kicked my butt at pickleball this weekend. So without a thyroid, all synthetic. But yeah,
iodine is what the issue of if they did at Chernobyl and other incidents. But did they ever issue iodine at 3 Mile Island? I don't think they did. I don't think it was that bad. It really wasn't that bad.
I will say this, you know, if I grew up in a younger generation, I mean, in a different generation, I think I would have held on to my anti-nuclear beliefs. I think it is rational to be anti-nuclear because I don't think that the public was fully aware. And in some senses, and I want to be sensitive because I know there are some people on this call who have worked in nuclear their whole lives, and this isn't to delegitimize your work, but like we understand radiological science today better than we did 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. We have made progress. And so it felt a bit like a science fair project, a top-down government idea. And I think the physicists and things and folks who work in nuclear safety like probably had an idea that it was safe enough, and that's why they had the confidence to do their job. But at the same time, Three Mile Island, Chernobyl, and even Fukushima led to a lot of changes in the way that we regulate nuclear, and like we've learned from it. So I see some kinds of and I would say I've been guilty of this in the past, Mr. Nachman, is I've been like, nuclear, it's safe. We just overreacted, but I don't think that's the full story. I think we have learned and iterated over and over again. And this culture of safety in nuclear has been a success. Some blame the culture of safety for holding nuclear back, and some say that this obsession with safety has actually endangered more lives, which I think is an interesting framing. That if we had nuclear around the world today, we would be in such a better position from a human health standpoint. And I can understand those ideas. But at the same time, all we can do is live in the present and say, look at the options that are available to us and try to make a decision. All energy has trade-offs, everything has risk. And statistically, even with Chernobyl, nuclear energy is the safest form of energy per megawatt hour. And if we take Chernobyl out, it is, and when I say it's the safest, it's in line with solar energy, and it's certainly safer than wind energy because of the challenging environments that wind is put into. And then if we follow that upstream and the limited mining impact that nuclear has, because it uses so little concrete and steel in these sanctuaries of clean energy that work for 100 years, well, that amortizes very well. And then the amount of uranium that needs to be mined is very low. But I will say that, part of my research, so I work for the Department of Energy's consent-based siting program, and my job is to meet with communities and talk about nuclear waste. And I can tell you there is deep, deep distrust of our government, especially in Native American communities. We really committed something terrible to the Navajo people in the southwest corner of the United States when we mined uranium on their land and didn't give them employed Navajo men and did not give them protective equipment. And 380 Navajo men died of respiratory illnesses relatively quickly. And it's the
Well,
greatest nuclear tragedy that no one really knows about. It's the more Navajo men died than the history of American nuclear energy, that's for
wait,
sure.
Ryan, can I interrupt? When was their exposure? What years do you know off the?
1954 to 1972.
Yeah, okay. And they
And
didn't
a lot
have,
of them were mining for uranium that was later used in bombs. Not very
yeah,
much of that
but
was.
they didn't have respirators. They didn't have this or that, sensors or any of that stuff existed. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and the
Uh,
mines were poorly ventilated, and it was a lot of
yeah,
radon gas that they
yeah,
were.
yeah, yeah,
And it was a form of racism. It was, cheap labor and a
yeah.
lack of oversight. And there were also, other fatalities of non-indigenous people at that time. But it created a deep rift in the history of nuclear. And I think it all goes back to something that I think is upstream from everything that we also haven't talked about, Mr. Nachman, and that is it's this technology's proximity to nuclear weapons. And I think at its root, the feeling of unsafeness of nuclear energy, to me, and in my research, is rooted that like it's all coming out of the Manhattan Project. It's all related to this apocalypse. And like, how can we move forward as a species with those relations? And it's really radicalized me just in the last few months. I've decided to take a stronger anti-nuclear weapons stance. It's really the only like way I can kind of cope with the work that I'm doing. And I'd really like to see the federal government of the United States separate these things from each other. Like help us understand that these are entirely different applications of a science, And I don't pretend to know that. I've been writing much more about it recently. But I think reckoning with weapons, reckoning with the accidents of the past, and reckoning with nuclear waste are essential if we want to move forward from a broad societal standpoint.
Right.
And I think it's something that it feels like a lot to put it on every American and every human in existence to reckon with those three existential issues that are very difficult to understand. And I hope better writers than myself and better communicators than myself can encapsulate them. But this is one of the great challenges in human history. And so I do think there's value in educating ourselves on this. And for a long time, the people providing the education in nuclear weapons, nuclear waste, and nuclear accidents have had a bent against nuclear because they felt it was against God, it was too far, we didn't need that much energy, and we needed to change the trajectory of humanity. And I felt those things too in my life. I've had like a very anti-human phase in my 20s. It was very in vogue for my generation to be anti-human.
Yeah.
And I think we're all kind of snapping out of that because we love humans and we have different faith traditions that makes us honor humans. And we also have we see the direction of this world and that we have to work together, that we're not gonna, there's nothing that's gonna
Mm.
to go back, to go down, to degrowth, to be against humans is to be against ourselves. And comes from some kind of self-hatred. So this is all like a rambling response to something that's very like I hold very, very close to my heart because I felt the terror of nuclear energy for the first 32 years of my life. And sometimes
Mm.
I'm like told that I'm a little cavalier in my outlook and like not, talking about safety, but I really just want to express my excitement and optimism and like how how I'm relating to people my age who are Republican, Democrat, socialist, all these people coming together around this optimistic idea. And I just have so many things to say that sometimes I just forget to talk about some of the, like our past trauma on that. But
Right.
yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective, Mr. Nachman, and like what are you seeing in your world?
No, I can relate to the existential threat because all of us lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis when we went to bed and we didn't think we would see another day.
Yeah.
And I mean, power to you. I hope you're successful.
Thank you.
Dorothy, you have a question. Dorothy.
Actually,
Yeah.
I have a comment, and I'm not an expert on it, and my information comes from sources like the Earth is a Nuclear Planet, which we're reading and we'll have another lecture on. But apparently, the 3 Mile Island released very, very little radiation. I forget exactly how much, but certainly not enough to have caused any thyroid issues. I think there's a totally different issue with Soviet-built reactors. I still don't trust them to be building modern reactors. And I think that this brings up a question. Yes, reactors are safe if they are built in countries like ours that have a history of good industry, of trained staff, and rigorous rules about the construction and maintenance of these facilities. They are not safe if they're shoddily built and put on earthquake fault lines and put near shores where tsunamis can affect them. It really does depend on the industrial integrity of the nation that builds them. So
Yeah.
that's all I have to say.
I can relate to that. I have a different perspective in that, while geopolitical tensions do feel elevated in this moment, and certainly like our commitment to science and technology has been incredible in this country and many countries around the world. The reason that we set up the IAEA is the International Atomic Energy, is that agency, is that we wanted to create a global framework of science and technology to relate to each other. Just like the original concept of the United Nations, which I really support, is like we can all come together, we can take pressure off of the United States as the hegemonic power, and we can create this framework that we can all agree on. And I'm seeing some very positive things from the IAEA recently. I think they've been a bit quiet because nuclear was so unpopular and Fukushima occurred and we were really rethinking like what the role is. And now that physicists are being so clear that we just absolutely need nuclear energy. It's just we will not be able to achieve our goals from an environmental standpoint, from an affordability standpoint, from a reliability standpoint without a nuclear energy cornerstone on our grid. And we're seeing this very clearly in countries who have phased out nuclear and things like that. So I think the IAEA can help. Of course, like siting is a concern, but I truly believe that every nuclear reactor in the world today could melt down. Every Russian reactor, you know, and I mean any reactor that you don't feel comfortable in, every single one could melt down right in this moment, and no one would be harmed
Well,
because of the incredible dedication of these international bodies who have created the fail-safes for that. And like many couldn't melt down because there are so many fail-safes in place. But truly, even if in a catastrophic situation like Fukushima, where, this tidal wave struck the plant, knocked out the power, and, all of those reactors melted down, we see beyond the psychological terror, which was tremendous in the forced evacuation, no one was harmed in
right.
2011 by Fukushima.
But Chernobyl was a totally different thing, and I don't know whether there are any more plants still
There
in
are.
existence. Okay.
They do have
There's a
containment
new,
films,
there's a
though.
new Gen. Yeah, Steven showed us a video of a new Gen 4 that Russians made. It looked like quite the machine, and it would burn spent fuel. And they had it running, and then went to spent fuel. It looked really solid. Now maybe that's the one. Maybe they've learned their lesson. I don't know.
Oh,
But
certainly. But I'm
yeah.
talking about like the old Russian
Yeah,
reactor.
I'm talking
yeah,
about
the old. How many old ones? Yeah,
Chernobyl-like designs. I
They
don't know how
have
many
there
gotcha.
are Chernobyl-like designs in operation today,
Or
and
them.
and
Well, what about the one in Ukraine and that keeps getting bombed? Where does that one sit? I don't know.
it's a
Is it,
slightly newer design.
but is the containment really not very good? I have no idea.
The
I
containment
mean,
is good, and then all the other fail safes around it are good. And
just
anyone that's been put in a lot of those are in cold storage as a
yeah,
precaution.
but they
And
need power. I mean, they they hammer them so they don't have power. The Russian Putin hammers them so they don't have power, so that handicaps them. But can I say one comment though about a connection of nuclear fission to the bomb, and that is there's two connections. One is the mining, and the other is the waste. How do you deal with the waste? Both are connections, and the mining still has to go on with Gen 2s. With the AP1000, the mining still has to continue unless you recycle the spent fuel with breeder reactors and create some fuel for them. And so you can recycle the fuel a bit. Otherwise, the mining is still there.
But it's not typical mining. It's a special infiltration that doesn't require upsetting the
Oh,
land and causing the dust that happened in New
yeah.
Mexico. Very different kind of mining.
Okay.
yeah, we can talk a little bit about uranium mining and reprocessing, and I can show you some pictures. I've been really pleased at what I've found uh, during my research for the Department of Energy on this regard. Um, let's begin um, with fuel, and I call it like the nuclear fuel cycle, because that's a broader picture that we can kind of we talk about nuclear waste a lot, but I'm like, let's talk about the whole thing. How can we really understand this? And we can begin with mining. And currently, the in vogue form of mining that is taking over the industry is, instead of these gopher holes or pit mines where we're digging down and finding these deposits or digging under the deposit, we are now doing something called in situ mining, IN-SITU. And that is a form of mining that works with heavy metals. And uranium is just about the heaviest metal on the periodic table. It's naturally occurring. And so it can be dissolved in water and pumped to the surface. And so, we hear these stories of people going to visit uranium mines and being quite disappointed because it looks like just a field. I'll show you what the one in Wyoming looks like. And it's quite underwhelming. Um, so here is the largest in situ uranium mine in the United States. Oh, let's see. That picture is copyrighted. Let's find another photo. Um, let's see here. Are you seeing this Google image search on my screen?
Yep.
Yes. Yep.
I can see it fine. I can see it fine.
Well, it's quite small, and I apologize. It's not higher resolution. But essentially, those little, you know, wellheads are pumping water down and then back up. And then this facility, this small building here, is separating the uranium from the water and then using that same water to pump it back down. And I've heard it called unmiraculous. And, uranium is in every rock on Earth. Now, it's in trace amounts, and we probably wouldn't mine it, but it is more abundant in the Earth's crust than tin. And tin is very valuable, but we don't see it as something that's so precious. And so uranium is quite common, and we can mine in situ and power the whole world on this technology on known reserves of it for about 700 years. There's a lot of contention around that. So it's not an unlimited energy source as it pertains, but like 700 years is pretty good. And then by the time that that is done, the uranium recovery from seawater, I think, will take over the industry. Because, if we're talking about renewable energy, uranium is constantly dissolving in the ocean. And when we swim in the ocean, we're swimming in uranium. And you can use these advanced sponges that are electrified to attract uranium in a passive way. And if we were to unlock this technology, it's a bit more expensive, but if the whole world was running on uranium, then this would be child's play. We would just mine uranium from the ocean, and that would kind of be at the top of the funnel. And then all the work that we're doing on reprocessing will also occur. And I think that's a very exciting aspect. I think that, these new recycling facilities are being built in shipping containers that you can just bring directly to a nuclear plant and just recycle it right in the backyard of a nuclear plant. And it's very exciting. It's not quite available yet, but there's some amazing companies working on that space, and Native American people who are supportive of nuclear are really leading the charge for nuclear recycling. And I also want to point out one other technology. It's called a high pressure slurry ablation. And
Quick
this is going
question,
to,
if I could,
oh
before
yeah,
you go on. Are those sponges natural or just conventional sponges? Are they man-made or natural?
they're man-made.
Okay,
It's an
yeah,
electrified
okay,
synthetic
thank you,
sponge.
thank you.
The final company that or technology that I would point us to is this. I don't think we have a good diagram here, though it's not a very interesting technology, is this machine that they this company wants to take to Navajo Nation and the 3,000 other abandoned uranium mines in the US that still have a lot of uranium tailings and that it's just kind of gravel that has uranium in it. You shovel the gravel into this machine, it blasts it with water and it separates the uranium from it. And if we were to use this technology as well, just in the United States, we would gain another 200 years of nuclear fuel for our reactors. And it would clean up these abandoned uranium mines that are still cordoned off and are creating bad feelings with native populations. About a third of the abandoned uranium mines in the United States are on Native American land. I mean, it's all Native American land, but like on their reservations. So you can imagine that there's a lot of anger in this space because these mines are still off limits and they're probably safe, but like you wouldn't want to just be playing in the gravel. And unfortunately, Native people use that gravel and built it into the foundation of their homes. And that has created birth defects and all this like really sad stuff. And so I really like this company because they're saying, hey, we're going to go in and we're going to fix it and we're going to get uranium out of it and we're going to sell that uranium and we're going to make clean energy out of it. So I think there are these technological solutions in our lives that can like solve many issues at once, and I think we should continue to support them. So I really like this company, and once again, and this company led by a 32-year-old guy, MIT grad, super smart. I've met him a few times and he's a great guy, and like he's so motivated just to clean up these sites on native land, and they have tremendous amount of support from native communities, and they're getting their final approval from the NRC, and this could begin as early as next year. So there's a lot of solutions for nuclear fuel for sure. Yes, Dorothy.
Um, I'm curious whether the Native Americans will get any residuals from the uranium on their land. I suspect that they did not share in the profits from the original mines other than providing labor. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I'm not privy to those specific negotiations, but yes, like that is the path forward. And it's more than just monetary. It has, I think they've been really wise in doing it as educational grants for young Indigenous people working in science and technology. Because in the wisdom of Native people, it's yeah, sure, like give me $1 today, I'll take it. But like we have to create intergenerational wealth. We have to improve the economic conditions in these reservations. And some reservations are quite wealthy, some portions of tribes are very wealthy, but they want to see more science, technology, and engineering in Native communities. And so they've got multiple Native people working for this company. And I think that's like really visionary. But yes, there is a combination with some of the incentives from the government as well. But yeah, the sales of the uranium, there will be some percentage on it, something called like a shumi tax, where it's like a land tax on it that would go to the native people. And we're also seeing that negotiation occurring at Diablo Canyon in California. I've been working with the tribe there, and in order to extend the operations of Diablo Canyon, which can run for another 40 to 60 years, the Native American tribe is like, we want some we want some considerations here. So they're kind of working through it legally. One of the ideas is just to charge a tax on the cars that go across their land to the nuclear power plant. And, that would be one sufficient way to do it. The other thing that I think we underestimate with Native people, because I think I certainly had an intuition that it was just about money, and you could just solve it with money and it makes it more expensive, but nuclear can handle it. But really, like, it's about the land and access to that land and the ability for Native people to steward that land. And I was really underestimating the importance it is for those people to have access. And for this tribe in around Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant, because it's a nuclear power plant, they are barred from their historical homeland. And there are 4 village sites like on the land itself. And
I did not know that.
and now the tribe has worked with the utility company, and now they have visitation, and they're in the loop with some of the biologists that work for PG&E who are managing all the wildlife and everything. And so just beyond money, it's like it's stewardship, it's participation, it's acknowledgement, and just being, not excluded from the land is also very important to folks. And I think that's the problem with the Navajo Nation, is that there are areas of their land that they're not allowed to go to because of this. And like, how does that feel? It feels like a scar. If more worse than a scar, it feels like an illness that needs to be cured. Yes, Richard.
It's a slight change in topic. I think we've really hit this one pretty hard. I'd like to know about Yucca Mountain. I understand that the nuclear industry has paid for that, and yet nothing is happening. It's a political turmoil. Surely we're going to get something out of that. Where is that headed?
Well, it's a good question. I think in some ways I don't think it's headed anywhere, because I think that there's something better than Yucca Mountain.
Such as
And so as I mentioned, my work is with the Department of Energy's consent-based siting consortia. And I'm so grateful to be presenting to you all. And I think it makes sense that we're ending here. So thank you,
good.
Dr. Steeves. The nuclear fuel, nuclear waste. I think Yucca Mountain, in my research, is an example of what not to do. Just like Chernobyl is what not to do, and we can learn from this experience because it was top down. It was like, this is how it's going to be,
Yeah.
and everyone else can just deal with it. And at the root of it, it's Native American land, and the Native American people said, you can't, over my dead body, basically. And that sentiment grew into an environmentalist movement, which ultimately opposed and stopped it. Now, so,
I didn't know that that was Indian land. So
it was indeed. And it's a very beautiful area too, undeveloped. And, I think it was probably, I just don't know who chose that area. Well, I guess I do, but it was also an area that has the trauma of the nuclear weapons testing site. So a state had just exploded hundreds of nuclear weapons, and like some deep, deep psychological trauma. And then they're like, now we're going to store it on your land. It just, like, what a terrible decision. What's interesting is, I talked to one of the architects of Yucca Mountain, and I was kind of like in an irreverent mood. And I said, how many lives will Yucca Mountain save? And he said 0. Because burying this tremendous resource underground, like we're ashamed of it, doesn't have any root in science or health physics. It's And I can understand some countries have made that decision, like Finland, to have a deep geological repository. But I think cutting edge nuclear science is looking at it and not being afraid. You can hug these casks. Nuclear waste, I've been to the casks. You can hug them, you can kiss them. I mean, maybe that's irreverent too, but I see them as great trophies of clean energy, not something to be ashamed of, not something that we should borrow from. I think society should be able to go and interact with nuclear waste and that's what they do in the Netherlands. It's an art museum and you can go right up to the nuclear waste and look at it and like, let's take the mystery out of it instead of hiding it away in some tunnel like it's this great danger. It's not dangerous at all. It's never nuclear waste has never harmed any American in history.
Well,
So
if I can interject, yeah, we can use a lot of the material and waste, but we're dealing with plutonium, which there are different mixtures of plutonium that are only one or two atomic weights apart. And I would think that might be a legitimate place to follow Finland, or are there consent-based settings for plutonium as well?
yes, I have heard from a lot of experts in this field that it's all recyclable into some type of fuel, whether
Oh,
it's a
yeah,
reactor that we have today or a future reactor, it's fine.
yeah,
Like we
yeah,
can use it all. There will not be anything that can't be used if we don't
yeah.
want it. And so I just see it as valuable. And so we might as well put it in a facility that we have better access to it and doesn't cost taxpayers billions of dollars. And so some people think that stopping Yucca Mountain was a good thing in the nuclear industry because we were going to spend $12 billion on something that we didn't need, and those are taxpayer dollars. And if I think it's unfortunate that we spent $5 billion already,
Yeah.
certainly, and like some people want to get some use out of that. I see that very strongly in the Senate. They want to reopen Yucca Mountain, but the Department of Energy has shifted to consent-based siting. Let me see if I can find a photo. But ultimately, they have hired myself and many other people to talk with communities to find a community that would just want to site it above ground on concrete pads for 100 years, not forever, just 100 years until we can find recycling facilities or a long-term repository. And the federal government has also said that they plan to have a deep geological repository for anything that they can't use.
Right. And
And,
that's, go ahead, finish.
and that will open in 2100.
And
Oh, wow.
the military already has sites, which we
Yeah, in
don't talk about,
Arizona
right?
or New
True.
Mexico. No. But,
Yep.
if you recycle it, and yeah, fast reactors can use all of it. I mean, once they're created, um, but 5% of it will have to be put away because it's gonna be radioactive for 300 years. There's going to be a 5% penalty to get bury it or do something with it or secure it. And by the way, all those casts you're talking about, Ryan, they cost the federal government like $2 billion a year. They have to provide security for where they're located, and those entities where they're located get that 2 billion a year or something in that ballpark from what I've read.
Yeah, it's
And we're
certainly
still
costing
paying
us
we're
some
still
money.
paying rent on those. I hate to tell you.
Yeah, it's certainly costing us money to store it in the back
Yeah,
because of some legal loophole that the federal government was going to take the nuclear waste and now the nuclear power plants have to store it, so they sue the government to get some money. And so that's why the federal government wants to consolidate this. And so we plan to have 2 to 4 sites in the next few years selected in communities that want them on private land or on native land. That's one big consideration. That's kind of my role in the engaging tribal communities in that. And we're going to put them on train cars and we're going to move them to that place and they're going to sit there for 100 years, and they are impervious to missile attacks and planes crashing into them. So there's really no reason why it can't just sit somewhere else. But like, let's move it. Let's demonstrate competency in moving it. Let's put it in a community that wants it. Let's pay that community so like 100-year lease and a community benefit agreement, and it will save taxpayer money immediately and buy the United States 100 years to work on our reprocessing, work on
Yeah,
our, you
but
know,
but
building
I
our
think
more capacity.
I think the reprocessing can happen a lot sooner. And you were talking about container units that could move to all of these sites and start the reprocessing. I think that whole thing can happen way sooner than 100 years. It can happen in 20 years or maybe less. Anyway, that's just
Agreed.
my opinion.
And
Yeah.
and and if that's the case, great that we can do that at the consent-based siting location. And it'll take time to reprocess. It won't all reprocess overnight. So we
Oh,
need
yeah,
to,
absolutely. You're right.
and the idea would
Absolutely.
be maybe even site those recycling facilities at the consent-based siting spaces. So these
Okay.
places, these communities that are like, I want
Yeah,
it, they're logically
yeah.
saying, hey, can we also
Start
build a
there.
reprocessing center next door?
Start
And
there.
so I think it's like really positive. And what I love about the consent-based siting consortia is it pays me to host public conversations about nuclear energy across the country, something that this country hasn't done since the invention of the AEC in the 50s, where they had a bus going around the country educating Americans about how nuclear worked. I kind of see myself in the same vein, and all of my
Hmm.
colleagues who I work with is we travel the country with Native American people and Mothers for Nuclear and academics, and we hold these public events. Our most recent one was in Chicago, and people come and pro-nuclear people come, anti-nuclear people come, and we all come together and we just talk and about the current state of affairs and the opportunity if a community would like to host nuclear waste in their area, that would be great. And I think strategically locating them kind of in like one on the West Coast and like one in the middle of the United States and two on the East Coast and distribute that and start moving it around would really increase our confidence around nuclear waste and kind of demystify it. And that would take pressure off of Yucca Mountain. I think Yucca Mountain could be reopened. What's interesting about Yucca Mountain is if we were to put all of our nuclear waste in it today, it would be full. So not many people know that it was designed with like a limited capacity. So we would need to reprocess our fuel anyways. And I don't think Yucca can solve all of our challenges. And I do think that, you know, bringing communities and fostering local conversation about this matter can improve and set an example for how to do all kinds of infrastructure development, not just nuclear, but this country needs to reindustrialize and refresh all of our infrastructure. And why not put Native American people at the front of that? Why not put people who are interested in that in the front of it? Why not put communities who are seeking that type of infrastructure at the front of it instead of doing this top-down methodology, which just hasn't proven to work in our democracy?
I think that would be fine as long as the states, important states around us here in the Midwest, like Illinois and um, Minnesota, can reverse their moratorium accordingly. If this 100-year storage will substitute, because otherwise you're seriously impeding the ability of other states to go to modern reactors, Gen 4 reactors.
Agreed. I think these moratoriums need to come down. And, I made a presentation last week to a bunch of California legislators about the importance of legalizing nuclear in California again. We can run our existing reactors, but we cannot build a new nuclear reactor of any type in
Yep.
California.
Yep.
And, it's But we do have a law that we're going to be 100% clean energy by 2045. And physicists, grid analysts, they have all said that that is impossible. It will not occur if we do not use nuclear.
Yeah.
And we could build a tidal wave of wind, solar, and batteries and geothermal. Absolute everywhere you can see.
Yeah.
And it still wouldn't allow us to be 100% clean energy. So we need to make a choice. Either we're going to repeal that law that says we're going to be 100% clean energy because we can't, and we're just lying to ourselves, or we enable the technology for us to achieve that. And my research has shown that if you still need a lot of wind and solar to do it, because even if we wanted to do it with all nuclear, we wouldn't be able to build it in time by 2045. So that's the reality. So what we can do though is nuclear can provide this huge base load and offset our need for our reliance on natural gas power plants. And we don't have coal in California either. We import some from Utah. I shouldn't say that. We're probably like 4 or 5% coal from out of state. We don't have any in state. But we are 55% reliant on natural gas in California, and we have a ton of solar panels. I mean, I could throw a rock and hit like 7 different solar power systems from my house in Berkeley. And
We have trains coming around the clock, but mostly at night, bringing coal in from Montana for our coal plants here. It's terrible. But just a reminder, we've got 10 minutes left. So just to the group, so we can sort of wrap up our conversation. I really appreciated the depths of your discussions, and but there's still 10 more minutes for people who want to.
Can I get it? I've been trying to get a quick question in, and there's been a lot of good stuff to listen to. Is one part of the circle of nuclear energy here is enrichment, and I never hear much talk about who's doing the enrichment, and if we expand the more nuclear plants, as the AP1000 idea is, how capable are we of amping up the enrichment process?
that is another major concern pointed out in the liftoff report, is that we do not have the fuel necessary. And another reason why using conventional reactors in the short term makes sense, because we can step up that capacity faster and import from the global supply chain that far faster than some of these advanced technologies. And so my answer is it's an achievable goal. You know, if these other things start moving the way we want them to, we will be able to step it up, but that is certainly part of it. And the history of nuclear enrichment in this country is fascinating. It's been a series of missteps, really. We keep like kind of building enrichment and then tearing it down and not using it. And at one point, nuclear uranium enrichment was consuming like 3% of all American electricity, you know, like because it used to be very inefficient. So to answer your question, it's one of the many challenges in this society-wide opportunity, and it is something that will be solved, but requires investment and labor and state leadership. And what I hope is that these different states and governors and public utilities commissions will see this opportunity as more than just a source of electricity. This is the new economy, and how can start competing and trying to get ahead on these technologies instead of resisting them and saying, not in my backyard. You should say, yes, in my backyard. We want those jobs. We want to provide that national leadership. And so I think we're seeing states like Ohio and Arkansas getting very, very interested in fuel reprocessing, fuel creation, and that's where some of these new facilities are going up.
Yeah, the standard for Gen 2s, the AP1000, that's a standard process. It has a very minimal centrifugation component, and it's the standard thing. It's when you And, when you want to go to Gen 4s, then you can recycle it. And I don't know how much, it's a whole different ballgame, really, when you're up there. I don't know. There's more to read and understand about that, but I'll make some comments tomorrow about it. All right, that's it.
Wonderful. Yeah, I agree that we can make conventional fuel very easily. I will say that the Department of Energy considers the AP1000 as a Gen 3 plus reactor, and they also
Oh,
consider it a advanced reactor. And so
huh.
everyone says like advanced nuclear, and they're like, well, if you want to call it advanced nuclear, that's fine, but the AP1000 is advanced nuclear. So just yeah, we're splitting hairs here,
Yeah.
but terminology is important to the federal government, and this is a Gen 3 plus reactor. It's just
Huh.
shy of 4. And
Okay. Okay.
yeah, anyways, any other questions before we wrap up our time together?
We're, we're looking forward to seeing you on our Friends of Fission tomorrow, and
Yeah.
hope you have a few words left to share with us
Yeah, I'll be
tomorrow morning.
compiling this email out, and let's continue that conversation. And I just to kind of wrap up, we'll never know the effect of our advocacy, and that's okay. Just like the trees we plant, we'll never know who sits under the shade of them. But I will say that I talked to someone from the White House at Climate Week last month, and he said, "What you're doing is making a difference."
Yeah, good.
And
I think so.
so I just feel like this is just something that is worth sticking our neck out a little bit. And I'm so grateful to all the people who have worked in nuclear in the past, who have made it so safe, made it something that we can advocate for so strongly. And so, like this is generations and generations of effort into this space. And I look forward to continuing the conversation. I recently did accept a job offer from a nuclear development company. So I'll be kind of transitioning to building new nuclear. And, it sounds so audacious to say that we're going to build these big reactors again, but there is an enormous amount of interest out there. So I look forward to, continuing my work in advocacy as well as, making a career transition into working in the nuclear industry. So should be cool.
Great.
Oh, congratulations, Ryan.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes. Congratulations on that. And just in line with this meeting next week, Alan Petticoff is going to talk on the subject, are renewables getting us there? We're looking forward to that.
I think this one pretty much told us the answer to that question.
I certainly have some perspectives to share on that matter as well. And I think we should be very careful with talking poorly about renewables. I don't
Yeah.
think it's
There is an interim, and we're in that interim.
Yeah.
And you gotta have them. Some of these states they're helping them out.
Hey, let's save all this for next week so we have
Okay.
time.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Ryan. I really
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
again. Sorry I was late. I'm feeling so much better already, but maybe it's because I got out of
Yeah,
bed and
it was-
popped some more pain medication. But I'm feeling
Yes.
great, and I'm so grateful to you all. I'll see you on the email, okay? And see you tomorrow.
Okay.
Well,
Very
thank
good.
you. Great talk.
You all.
Wonderful to meet you all.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.